Okay, let's jump right into this incredible moment in history. The year is 1588.
And you have a real clash of titans brewing.
You have King Philip II of Spain, who is probably the most powerful ruler in the world at this point. His empire is massive.
And he decides he's going to invade England, which is this, much smaller island nation ruled by Queen Elizabeth I.
And he doesn't do it by halves. He spends years building this fleet, this armada.
A fleet so huge they nicknamed it the Invincible Armada. They genuinely believed it was, well, invincible, unstoppable.
Which sets up the big question, right? How on earth did a smaller English navy manage to defeat this supposedly unbeatable force?
That's what we're going to break down. We'll look at the reasons for the fight, the huge differences in their ships and weapons, and then the three key moments that really sealed the Armada's fate.
Let's start with the why. This wasn't just a simple squabble over territory. It was about religion, politics, and money.
A whole lot of money.
Yep.
But let's start with religion. Philip II was a very, very devout Catholic.
Right, and he saw himself as the champion of Catholicism in Europe.
Exactly. And England, under Queen Elizabeth, had become firmly Protestant. For Philip, it was kind of a holy duty to bring England back to the Catholic faith.
And he was willing to use force to do it.
Oh, absolutely. But you mentioned money, and that was a huge motivator, too.
He must have been furious about the English raiding his ships.
Furious is an understatement. You have to remember, Spain was bringing back enormous amounts of gold and silver from the Americas.
The famous treasure fleets.
And English privateers, who were basically government-approved pirates like Sir Francis Drake, were constantly attacking them.
Stealing a fortune.
A massive fortune. It was hurting Spain's economy, and it was a huge insult to Philip's power.
So you've got this mix of a holy war and a financial grudge. The plan was clear. Conquer England, get rid of Elizabeth, and secure Spanish control of the seas for good.
And to do that, he built this monster fleet, which brings us to the ships themselves. The size of the Armada versus the speed of the English.
Just the numbers sound insane. What are we talking about here?
It was about 130 ships. They carried something like 20,000 soldiers and 8,000 sailors.
And these weren't just any ships.
No. These were massive galleons. Think of them like giant wooden fortresses, built really high out of the water. Their whole purpose was to carry a ton of soldiers and supplies.
They're basically floating castles.
That's the perfect way to describe them. They were designed to get close, ram if they had to, and then put soldiers on the other ship's deck.
But while Spain was building bigger, Elizabeth was thinking differently.
She was thinking faster. England knew they couldn't build as many ships or carry as many soldiers, so they focused on innovation.
How so? What made their ships different?
The new English galleons were built lower to the water, they were narrower, and just all around sleeker. This made them way, way faster and much easier to handle.
Especially in the choppy waters of the English Channel.
Precisely. Maneuverability was everything. And that speed played into a completely different way of fighting.
Let's talk about the weapons then. Because the Spanish strategy was basically a land battle on water.
Yes. They wanted to grapple, tie the ships together, and have their soldiers board. Their cannons were heavy, often short range, and really just meant to soften up the target before the real fight began.
But the English weren't planning on getting that close.
Not a chance. Their ships were built around their guns. They used longer range cannons called culverins.
And these
It meant the English could fire maybe 3 shots for every one the Spanish could get off. They could literally sail circles around the big, slow Spanish galleons.
So you have the English fighting a modern artillery battle, while the Spanish were ready for a medieval sword fight.
That's a great way to put it. And England was prepared on land, too. They had this brilliant warning system.
The beacon.
The signal fires, yeah. They were set up all along the southern coast. The moment the Armada was spotted, they'd light the first one.
And the signal would travel from beacon to beacon.
All the way to London in just a few hours. So there's no surprise attack. The English knew they were coming.
And you can't forget the morale boost. Elizabeth's speech at Tilbury is famous.
Oh, absolutely. She shows up in armor in front of her troops and gives this incredible speech. It showed everyone she was ready to fight to the end. It really unified the country against the invasion.
So the English are ready. They have faster ships, better guns. But the Spanish have a plan. What was it?
Well, the plan wasn't just to sail up and attack the English Navy. The Navy was just the first step. The real goal was to sail the Armada through the English Channel and link up with a huge Spanish army waiting in the Netherlands.
An army led by the Duke of Parma.
Right. And these were some of the best, most experienced soldiers in all of Europe, about 16,000 of them.
So the Armada's main job was to act as a shield.
Exactly. A shield to protect the transport boats that would carry Parma's army across the channel to invade England. The whole thing was about a land invasion.
And to protect those boats, the Spanish commander, Medina Sidonia, used a specific formation.
A very strong defensive one. He kept all 130 ships in a tight crescent shape, like a half moon.
Why that shape?
The strongest, most powerful warships were on the edges, on the horns of the crescent, and the weaker supply ships and transports were tucked safely in the middle. It was designed to be almost impossible to break through.
So when the Armada finally entered the channel, the English must have been a bit intimidated.
For sure. But they were disciplined. When they first engaged the Armada near Plymouth, they stuck to their plan.
Stay away, use the long-range guns.
Right. They followed the Armada up the channel for days, firing thousands of cannonballs. But they just couldn't break that crescent formation.
It must have been incredibly frustrating for them.
It was. And it was frustrating for the Spanish, too, because the English ships were so fast they could never get close enough to board them. So you have this stalemate.
Which brings us to the turning point. The moment everything changed.
The fire ships at Calais. This is it. The Armada had to stop and anchor off the coast of Calais in France to wait for Parma's army to be ready.
But Parma was delayed.
He was. His troops were stuck. They couldn't get onto their transport barges quickly. This gave the English a massive opportunity.
So while the entire Spanish fleet is sitting there packed together at anchor,
the English commanders took 8 of their old useless ships, filled them with anything that would burn, tar, gunpowder, wood, and set them on fire.
and just sent them drifting towards the Spanish fleet.
In the middle of the night, with the wind and the tide pushing them right into the crowded anchorage.
The panic must have been instant.
Total panic. Imagine being a Spanish sailor and seeing 8 floating bonfires coming right for your huge wooden ship.
So what did they do?
They made the single biggest mistake of the campaign. In their rush to get away, the Spanish captains ordered their men to cut the heavy anchor cables.
Why was losing an anchor so disastrous?
Because without their main anchors, these massive ships had no way to hold their position. The winds and the currents of the channel just took control.
And the crescent formation was gone.
It was completely shattered. The ships were scattered everywhere, and the next morning at the Battle of Gravelines, the English attacked.
And this time, they could get at the individual ships.
This time it was a slaughter. The fast English ships could close in, fire multiple broadsides into the Spanish hulls, and get away before the Spanish could even react.
And because they had no anchors.
They couldn't stop the wind from pushing them toward a series of deadly sandbanks. The invasion was over. They were defeated and forced to flee north.
But the disaster was just getting started for them, wasn't it?
The military defeat turned into a human catastrophe. They couldn't go back through the channel, so their only option was to sail all the way around Scotland and Ireland to get home.
Through some of the most dangerous waters in the world.
In ships that were already battered and leaking, with crews that were running out of food and fresh water, sickness was everywhere.
And then the weather turned.
The Protestant wind, as the English called it. They sailed right into a series of huge Atlantic storms. And this is where cutting those anchors at Calais came back to haunt them.
Because they couldn't stop themselves from being blown toward the coast.
Exactly. They couldn't anchor in deep water to ride out the storm. The winds just smashed dozens of their remaining ships against the rocky cliffs of Ireland.
The human cost must have been horrific.
Thousands drowned or were killed. For weeks, the Irish coast was just littered with wreckage and bodies. In the end, only about half of the ships that set out made it back to Spain.
It was a crushing blow to Spanish power and pride.
And a massive victory for England. It secured Elizabeth's throne, confirmed England as a Protestant nation, and really marked the beginning of the rise of the Royal Navy.
So looking back, it wasn't just luck, it was a combination of things.
It really was. You had better technology with the English ships and guns. You had a smarter strategy using those fire ships to create chaos.
And then you had the weather deliver the final blow.
It's a perfect example of how speed and new ideas can beat pure size and strength. The Spanish were fighting the last war, and the English were fighting the next one.
It really is an incredible lesson from history about how being prepared and even being lucky with the weather can change the fate of nations.
And it makes you think, what powerful force today might be relying too much on its size, while a smaller, faster rival is busy inventing a whole new way to compete?
Good luck with your studies. See you next time.